May
My
20.
name is Irving Lumerman, Irving Lumerman. That's my English name. My Yiddish name is Yitzchak, or commonly referred to by my parents' friends as Itchala.
Itchala.
I was born in Lukov, Poland. My birthday was May 3rd, 1937.
Which makes you how old today?
59.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
Before the war, there was just one sister. She's a year younger than I am.
And what's her name?
Her name is, in Hebrew it's Zipporah, and in English it's Fran, F-R-A-N. Her married name today is Bichler, B-I-C-H-L-E-R, and she lives in Fairlawn, New Jersey, New Jersey, USA. And like I said, she was a year younger, and we basically stuck together. We took care of each other wherever we went.
So how long in all were you living in the woods?
2 years. It was from 1942, was right around the Kippur time, through, let's say, June, July of 44.
Do you ever recall hearing your parents talking about Hitler or anything as the war started?
Not really. The only thing I remember is that a couple times, since we were like a little village out of the normal highways and so on, they didn't come to us right away, to our part of the village. They came, and this is more from hearsay now, that they came and they needed some people to go to work in certain areas, and they took a couple of people, my father was among them, to go to work in some of these camps.
Who took him?
Well, they came, I don't know whether it was a Judenrat or whether it was actually Germans. I don't think it was the Germans, I don't remember anybody. The only time I remember Germans is, I'll tell you, once before we went to the woods. And they said they need so many people to do some labor. And they took a bunch of them. My father was amongst them. This gentleman that I told you, Holler, that we used to have the shul in his house, he was one of them. And I guess he was away probably for 2-3 weeks, and he saw the situation wasn't good, and he didn't think it bode well. He said, we're not going to stay here, so he grabbed some of the people and himself, and they escaped. And it was him and this guy Holler and a few other people, and they started running, and I guess Germans found out about him and started chasing him. And they were too far away, so they let the dogs loose to run after them. And he remembers this one dog was almost right on top of them, and he grabbed a stick and he just shoved it down the dog's throat, basically, as the dog jumped on them, and then they managed to escape. And the war broke out in 1939, but it really didn't come to us until about 1942. And this is 41 and a half, let's say, because when we were in the village, my mother was gone. That's my first recollection of Germans.
Where was your mother?
She went to visit somebody in another little neighboring village. It was myself, my sister, and my father home. And somebody knocked at the front door. I looked out the window and I saw, I know now it was a German officer in black uniform and so on, knocking at the door. And I guess my father realized who it was, and I was being 5, he threw me out the window, the back window, and grabbed my sister, who was 4 and couldn't run as fast, and he carried her. And he says, we got to run. I didn't know why. He says, you got to run, you got to run. So here he's carrying my sister, who's 4, and I'm holding on to my hand. Not knowing what's going on, but just running. And we probably ran, it was in the summertime, we ran into one of the fields. And I remember that time they were stacking up all the hay bales for collection for the winter time. So we sort of dug our way into one of the bales and stayed there most of the day till, I guess, they completed the roundup. Finally, we came back that night, so we were saved, or so you might say. And then we decided that it's not safe to be in this village anymore. So we went from Lukov, which is where I was born, we moved to Yusufov, which was a little bigger, little city. We stayed there for probably not even a year, I don't think. And around Yom Kippur, and I had to be 42, we were in the services in shul, and somebody came yelling, you know, everybody run, there's a German action coming through town, and they're picking up all the Jews. And we ran into the woods, because it was close by, to hide out. We basically stayed in the woods for that day, and maybe a little longer, I can't remember. And I guess we came back to the village, and then we decided to go back into the woods permanently.
So how many people left the village and went into the woods?
Well, at that time, we probably had about 15, 20 families. After being in the woods for a while, we had one of those German sweeps through the woods. But through one of those sweeps through the woods, it came very sudden. We used to have lookouts all over, so we knew approximately when they're coming, but this one came very rapidly. And by the time they noticed them, we didn't have time to get organized and escape or run away in an organized fashion or put it away, so everybody just scattered. And I don't know where my mother was, my father was, but somehow I got hooked up with these two teenage girls. And they took charge of me. They, you know, which in itself was probably miraculous, because you know, when you're trying to escape, what are you going to do with a 5-year-old or 6-year-old kid dragging you after you? But you know, they stayed with me, or stayed with them. They watched over me. We were in this, like a little ravine, hiding and hoping we would be saved there. And I told the girls, I said, you know, I don't like it here. Let's move from there. I was a kid. Why would they listen to me? I mean, they knew they were safe, or they thought they were hidden. Why would they listen to me? But they did. And we moved away, crossed the road, and another one, taking another danger, being seen from who knows how far, and then ran deeper into the other side. And we maybe weren't a couple hundred yards away from there when we heard the Germans in that ravine where we were hiding. And if they wouldn't have listened to me, we would have probably been caught. And we spent the night together. They sort of huddled together, the girls, and next day we felt it was safe. We sort of migrated back to the camp where we left. And every time they had like one of those sweeps through the woods, there's always less people came back towards the camp. We never stayed long in one place. We used to stay maybe, I don't know, a couple of weeks, couple of months, depending on the location, and then move on someplace else, because we were afraid that if somebody finds out where we are, they might tell on us. There was one case, in the beginning, when we first got into the woods, we thought we might be safer in a bunker. So we dug, you know, the families, the man dug a bunker probably the size of, I want to say 5 by 5 or 5 by 7 feet. And at the entrance, we sort of like had a tree planted. And so this was the egress and egress from the bunker. And we had one case, and that was, I didn't mention that earlier, I had one sister, my mother was pregnant when we got into the woods, and she gave birth to a little girl. And
Where did she give birth?
in the woods. So
What was her name?
her name was Male, like Miriam, so on. So she was at that time, I don't think she was even a year old, just about under a year. And we were in the woods, and they had one of those German sweeps through the woods, and this German soldier happened to position himself right on top of the bunker, right by that tree. And she sort of started crying or whimpering. So everybody was afraid that she's going to give away the position. So they started piling clothes on her to muffle the sound, not realizing that she was suffocating, and she was suffocated. And I remember another case where I guess some of the people must have found them. They found a little boy, probably wasn't any older than I was, maybe he was a year older, in the woods. And I guess he must have been there for quite a while, because he was pretty much frozen. You know, he was still alive, but I always remember his eyes. Remember the eyes from this comedian Marty Feldman, big eyes they had. This is how his eyes were pretty much frozen in that position. And they brought him into our camp and they put him into our tent. And I remember myself, my sister, this friend of mine who's from New York, who's the same age as my sister. We were afraid of him. I mean, he was a little boy who was found in the woods. What I remember, I don't think he survived. But the look on his face, I always remember.
So what did you do during the day to keep yourselves occupied as kids, you and your sister?
Played hide and seek, tag, running around, being mischievous, getting into grown-ups' ways, getting into the pots whenever we saw them cooking. So, and that was basically it. So we just acting like kids. To us, it was just all a game. We were camping out, except whenever an action came or a sweep through the woods, and then the games got serious. And we realized that if we would get caught, we would die. That much we knew. So we knew to run, we knew to hide, we knew to be quiet and not make any noise and not do anything that would hurt anybody else. I remember first Yom Tov, I remember after coming out of the woods, is Sukkot. As we went back to the village, Lukov, that we were raised at, and we basically all lived in that house, Irving Hollis' house. Our home, I don't remember what happened to it, but either it was razed or somebody got into it. I can't remember why. We didn't live in our own village, in our own house. I would assume not too good because we didn't stay there too long. After that, we went to Tarnograd, which was another little bigger village, which was in the same neighborhood, and we lived there for, I'd say maybe 6 months, maybe not even that long. The only reason I can think of why we moved is because my parents felt it wasn't safe anymore. There, from Tarnograd, we moved to Lublin, and I remember us going to school, and we had to take the tram to go to school. And I was always fair, with blondish and, light features. So nobody ever took me that I was Jewish. And my sister, on the other hand, was dark complexion. She was dark hair, had a pointy nose, the typical type of people characterizing what a Jew looks like. So the children always used to ask me when I used to travel on the bus why I was associated with Jews.
What did you tell them?
Well, I told them she's my sister. And one of the reasons why we left actually Breslau was that my father realized that the situation for Jews is not good there. We had a case one night where we heard screaming and shots in the middle of the night, and then we found out next day that one of my parents' friends was killed. He survived the war and everything else, and he came back to Poland and he was killed in Breslau. We decided that Poland was not the place to be. Father said there's too much anti-Semitism, there's too much going on, and as a Jew, it's not where he wants to be. And we heard about the DP camps, so we figured we'll go there in Germany, and from there we'll find friends, relatives, or whatever we can go, because we're not there. So we went through Poland into Germany. And once we got into Germany, then they had these trains for us to take us to DP camps. They provided schooling for us. The schools over there were run by Israeli emissaries. So everything taught in those schools was in Hebrew. And that's why, even though my Hebrew now is a lot weaker than it used to be, I used to speak Hebrew fluently. And that's when I forgot actually my Polish, is because I started speaking Hebrew. School was in the morning till about 1 o'clock. So we went to regular school where we learned secular, math, writing, reading, and so on. And then the afternoon, those that wanted the religious training for the children went to Cheder. That was the idea that my parents put a preference on it, and then the priority, they said, this is the education we want you to get, both Hebrew and secular. But just to backtrack, while we were in Bad Reichenhall, we were supposed to, I guess my father's brother was supposed to sponsor him to go to Argentina. So we were supposed to go from Bad Reichenhall to Argentina. But in order to get into Argentina, you couldn't go in straight. You had to smuggle your way across the border from Chile to Argentina. And it turned out that the only time we could do it, this time around, when they were talking about it, was on a Shabbos. Shabbos Mayom, I can't remember what it was. And my father said, you know, I survived the war. And I kept Shabbos as much as I could. He says, I'm not going to desecrate Shabbos now. And we called it off. In Bad Reichenhall, I'm sorry, if you trade back, in Bad Reichenhall, right before we left, my youngest sister was born, Helen.
So do you remember the date you arrived in the United States?
Yeah, it was April, I want to say 21st. It was right after Pesach. We were Pesach on the boat. And it was quite difficult because all we could eat was matzahs, eggs, and potatoes. So we lived in New York, then I went to Yeshiva, went to RJJ. Then my parents moved to Brooklyn, Bensonhurst, which was a mixed Jewish Italian neighborhood. And I went to college, went to City College in New York, graduated with an engineering degree. And that's what brought me to Denver. Being an engineer, I worked for Bendix, and Bendix and Martin worked on the Skylab program. They needed so many engineers from back east, and asked me if I want to come, and I said, why not? It's supposed to be just 2 years, and 2 years turned into almost 29 now. My wife I met in 1960. This year, I was supposed to get married in 62, and the Army decided to send me to Europe for a year. So we had to postpone the wedding for a year. And so I came back in 63 and got married. My wife's name is Dorothy. Maiden name is Rosenberg Lumerman. And she was born in Toronto, Canada. Her parents are they came before the war, from Radom, Poland. And like I said earlier, we met in the Catskills. And my oldest one is Jeffrey, and he was born in 1966. That was 3 years after we were married in New York City. And my second one is Jody. My youngest one is Jonathan, who's named after my father, Ephraim. Right before Pesach, April 2nd, my son Jeffrey presented us with a granddaughter named Alexandra Rebecca, Rebecca being after my mother. Yes, I always felt that I owe them that. My parents did that to us, and that was my legacy to them. One of the things I put a high priority is that I want them, once the kids graduate high school, I want them to spend a year in Israel. I felt that, they learned about it, but it's some country far away, you don't know anything about it. But being there that year made a big difference in all of them. Every one of them came back with a different feeling about Israel.
Do you ever dream about any of your experiences as a child in the woods or anything?
Not really. I don't dream about them, but you remember them all. I was, I've been involved in a lot of survivor groups and so on. And a lot of people have very bad experiences, and they still feel them. I feel, and maybe at that point, maybe that's where my fortunate part comes in, is we survived as a unit. Myself, my sister, my parents. We always had somebody to watch over us. I always had somebody to, if you fell and you bruised yourself, to wash off the knee and make it good, kiss it and make it good. And I had very loving parents. And I think that made a big difference. That I don't feel I have as many problems as a lot of other people do. And maybe a lot of bad experiences, even though we went through it, because there was somebody there to help me out, to watch out, to explain what's going on, and to make us feel better.
Everything. Is there some message or anything you want to say to your kids, your future grandkids?
The only message I can say is, don't forget who you are. I gave them a good education, both secular and religious, and we were persecuted just because we were Jews, and for that reason I think they should be proud of who they are And we survived all these years, and just keep doing the same thing we're doing, not forget who we are.